Hi, welcome. Today's topic is on reading, productivity, and being exhausted. The channel reached 30,000 subscribers. This really amazes me, and I want to thank you so much for being here. Thank you. And so I asked to send in some questions. Now, I was happy to see that the questions were very much in line with what I usually talk about on the channel, and they're about reading and productivity and being exhausted. So aside from being a Q&A video, I hope that it will also be an informative video, and I have divided the questions into sections. So section number 1 will be on notebooks and commonplacing, the second on productivity, and the third will be general reading questions. I've really noticed a common theme and a common core to these questions, so some of them are merged together. First question is, have your notebooking and commonplace practices changed in your current season of self-academia? If so, how? My journaling habits haven't really changed, aside from the fact that I recently started a new commonplace book on philosophy. I have been wanting to get more into philosophy and continue my journey with it for a long time, and this is the year, guys, okay? So I am continuing my journey, and I started a new commonplace book so I can keep track of my progress, and so I can jot everything down that I want to remember. I've also noticed that I come back to my notes more often. So instead of just sitting down with a book, I sometimes grab one of my commonplace books and I sit down with them and I go through my notes. And this actually really works well. One of the issues that I had is when I'm reading or after I finish a book, I make notes. And the issue that I had was that I was taking all of these notes, but I wasn't doing anything with them. And so now I'm really slowly building in that practice of grabbing my notebooks and rereading what I have jotted down. Next question. I'd love you to talk about how you journal, on what you read, and how you develop depth and your thoughts in regard to great works. I talk about this topic a lot on my channel, so you can hopefully find something in the backlog of my videos. But in short, how I read is I sit down with my book, and I usually have or a pen to annotate my book or a notebook when I don't want to annotate in the book itself. Something I really cannot miss is my sticky notes, my tabs. So whenever there is something that I want to keep, remember, or something that really strikes me as interesting, then I give it a tab. This is really helpful when you don't immediately want to take notes, because it sometimes can kind of ruin the reading moment, or when you're in the zone, it can really pull you out of it. And so I like to use a tab. And when I finish my chapter or when I finish my reading session, I sit down and I take the time to go over them. Sometimes I even wait until I finish the complete book and then sit down and go over all of my tabs when there aren't too many tabs. Secondly, I really pay attention when I read. I turn my reading from passive into active reading, and that means really interacting with the content, asking yourself questions, and jotting things down. I often read with a friend, and it's always nice to discuss certain things, so that's always interesting. And I also have my book club going over Patreon, and we are always reading a book and discussing it. At the time of recording, we are March. We are reading North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell, and we're almost finished. And something that I also want to give as advice is, whenever you come across a quote, don't just become a collector of quotes and copy them in your notebook. Really make them yours. Try to figure out why this quote is resonating with you, put it into your own words, and really make it yours. The next section is on productivity. Question. You could say that the way we spend our free time directly influences who we are as a person, and then the pressure is greater to consume quality material. Although there are also things in everyday life to do. And then how do we make sure that we use our free time to define our tastes and do the necessary things, but without too much pressure gaining elitism tendencies? This question is very dense, and I don't know if I will be able to answer it correctly, but I think who we are has nothing to do with the work that we do with our job. And what really makes us us is the things that we do in our free time. So I think you're absolutely right about that. Why I think that is because I notice that when I talk to people I don't really know that well, I usually tend to ask not about their job, but about their passions. What are you passionate about? That is a much more interesting question to ask. What do you like doing in your free time? And I feel that this tells me much more about you as a person than just asking you, what do you do from 9 to 5? Now, when I look at your question, I think what you're struggling with is wanting your free time to mean something, and not wanting to turn your free time into another area of performance. And I do notice that modern life is draining people so much so that they don't have the energy to do anything after work. And then you get this scenario where your free time isn't there to practice the things that you're passionate about. It becomes recovery time. As for the part of your question about elitism, I think we shouldn't fill our time with things that we do to impress other people. The only thing that you need is to be passionate about something or about a certain topic, and you don't even have to tell anyone that you're doing it or that you're learning something. It can be just for you. The moment you think, I'm going to give an example, I'm going to learn a piano so I can impress people, that is not the right mindset. Also, not everything has to be high quality. And you also shouldn't care about what other people think about what you do in your free time, unless it is hurting themselves, others. When it becomes unhealthy, then I can see why guidance or advice would be helpful or useful. But as long as that is not the case, then I think everyone should do whatever they want. I am convinced that a lot of people think that I'm a snob because of the way that I like to fill my free time, but I really don't care because I do what I love doing, and there isn't a performance in what I do. I don't read to impress people. I'm not a musician or an author to impress people. I do all these things for very selfish reasons, and that is because I love doing them. And I actually had to think about a quote in the picture of Dorian Gray about meddling in other people's affairs and how they spend their time. And it goes like this: I never approve or disapprove of anything now. It is an absurd attitude to take towards life. We are not sent into the world to air our moral prejudices. I never take any notice of what common people say, and I never interfere with what charming people do. If a personality fascinates me, whatever mode of expression that personality selects is absolutely delightful to me. Focus on yourself and do what you love. Now, quality content is going to have a different meaning for everyone. It is very personal, and something that I find quality, another person will find nonsense. Next question. It would be nice if you talked about those days when, even though you have free time, you are so exhausted after studying or work that you rather get some additional sleep instead of spending those 1 or 2 hours on reading or self-development. I fear that the way society is structured nowadays brings people into a situation where even if you have a little free time, you are so stressed and tired that you rather do nothing than any intellectual activity, which would consist on more work for your brain. Is it maybe done on purpose? I have used this quote before and I will forever keep using it. People will come to love their oppression, to adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think. What Huxley feared was that there would be no reason to ban a book, for there would be no one who wanted to read one. He feared those who would give us so much that we would be reduced to passivity and egoism. First of all, on sleep. Sleep is important. And if you want to read, you need to be well rested, because otherwise you're going to fall asleep. And sleep is so important for your health. I think people are still not realizing how important it is. I may be an exception, but I need 9 hours. And when I go below 8 hours, I get headaches and I don't feel well. So I need my sleep. And some people think that I don't even sleep because of all the things that I do, but I do sleep. I sleep a lot. And if I would notice that my body needs rest, then I will give my body rest. That is the most important thing, your health. Because if you don't have your health, then nothing else is going to matter. So get your sleep. Now it becomes a problem when you say, I am too exhausted, and you don't give your body rest, and instead you do something that is going to exhaust you further. Because you can fall into the trap of thinking that you're giving your body rest while you actually should get rest. If that makes sense. When you think after work, okay, I'm too tired, I'm just going to watch TV, or I'm just going to scroll TikTok, that is not really resting. Now there is a fine line here, and you should decide for yourself if something restores you or something drains you further. So let's say you are too tired, you're going to scroll TikTok. How do you feel after that 1 or 2 hour session where you scroll on your phone? Does it restore you? Do you feel better afterwards? Or do you feel the same, or do you feel worse? This is something that you have to decide for yourself. What do you want to do when you feel that you're too tired to push yourself to read, for example? What is something that could restore you? Now, here are some options that I would personally go for. This is personal. This is what works for me. So if I'm tired, it could work to go on a walk, get some fresh air. If you can, not everyone can because of the area that you live in. My walking pad can help me to find energy again. What can also help is to listen to something while doing something with my hands. For example, coloring while listening to a podcast or something that you want to watch on YouTube. You could do some stretches, some exercises, some yoga, I don't know. I've never done yoga in my life, so this is not my personal experience. But yes, it's completely fine that you feel too tired. Just make sure that you kind of don't fall into the trap of giving your body rest, but it isn't actually rest. Something I also do to prevent me not doing in the evening what I should have done during the day is I do my most difficult brain work in the morning. And I read in French half an hour a day. And so I tend to do that in the mornings because when I'm tired in the evenings, it can just be too demanding to read in another language. So I do that first thing in the morning when I do my morning reading session. Second priority is the book club book that we're reading with my book club. I make sure that I've read those as well. And then when that's done, I can read whatever I want. I usually always have something to read that is not too difficult, that doesn't demand too much focus. So maybe that can be an option for you as well, where you just always have a book going that is just easy to read, that will help you relax and where you don't have to do too much thinking. You could also use your lunch break. Everyone needs a break. And so during the day, you will have more energy than at the end of the day. So maybe you can squeeze in some learning or reading time during your break. Sometimes in the evenings when you're exhausted, you want to be gentle with yourself. Next question. How do you prioritize when everything feels like it's important? School, work, household stuff, meal prep, reading, Netflix, Lego. How do you actually choose what to focus on first or not at all? Now, of course, you are going to have to see what is high priority and low priority. Maybe it helps to make a list. I have done this so many times, just making a list of all the things that I would love to do in my day or in my week, and things that really have to happen no matter what. These are things that get priority because they have a deadline or because you have an obligation to other people. And what I like to do is I like to balance the two. So the things that I love to do are getting a place in my day together with things that I have to do. You kind of have to find the right balance between things that you have to do and things that you want to do, things that feed your soul. If you like building Lego, like it says here, you can build in 20 or 30 minutes of building Lego and then afterwards do some meal planning or vacuum the floors. Okay, next question, and the final question in the productivity section. How do you manage so much in your life? You have 2 part-time jobs, a band which tours, you are an author, YouTube, and you have a husband and fur babies. Is it challenging to do all these things to your high standards? Do you get burnouts? I've had moments, absolutely, where I felt overwhelmed. But I really want to make it clear that I do not work for 40 hours a week, right? So here in Belgium, our work week is about 38 to 40 hours for a full-time job. And that is, of course, without overtime. I have 2 jobs, it's correct. I am a massage therapist, so I have my own practice here at home in a room where I receive my clients. And I have a full control about how many clients I take. And when I want to give myself a break for a week, I can. And then next to that, I work for a publishing house and I can do that from home. I've been working there since August last year, so it's kind of new. And I came from traveling by train for 3 hours a day to my job to Brussels, the capital of Belgium. And that even then I used my time in a very useful way. I didn't feel like I wasted that time because I was reading. And that was very lovely to be able to go by train and to actually read my books. But I do want to emphasize that I am not working 40 hours a week. It's more like 30 to 35. And I also repeat this often, but I don't do all of those things in a day. So that's for the job. Then my band, we actually don't really rehearse that much. We only rehearse before an important show, and it's not really that high demanding. We are not famous at all. We are lucky if we even get paid for a gig. So yes, there's some time that goes into creating new songs, but it's just not an everyday thing. My piano playing is also not an everyday thing. I do it whenever I want, and when it doesn't fit into my day, it's just going to be the next day. My husband isn't that much work, so I'm fine there. Now, as for the cats, that's kind of okay as well. I just do the cat litters, and yes, there's a lot of hair in the house that I constantly need to clean up. So of course I need to vacuum every day, otherwise there's going to be hair everywhere. And my Norwegian forest cat Dea, she is high maintenance. I mean, I need to brush her thoroughly every day because otherwise she gets matted hair, and that's really not good. So I do brush her every day, and that does take me like 20 minutes or something, but it's of course nothing compared to having children. I've certainly had moments where I felt overwhelmed, and it's important to listen to this feeling. When I noticed this, that's the moment where I decided to work a little less in my massage practice. So I put a stop to my clients, and I only work with the clients that I have at the moment, and I also limited my hours that I do in a week. And I decided that because I really did not want to give up this YouTube channel. This means so much to me, but it does demand a lot of time, not only to record, but to edit as well, and to prepare the videos, and to keep up with the comments. And I know this is a choice, and I'm not complaining at all, because I love everything about having this booktube channel, but I just cannot deny that it's a lot of work. Now let's continue with the part on reading. Question number 1. Do you use any method to choose which books to read, or do you just pick one randomly? That's a very easy question. I usually pick them randomly. I have one shelf dedicated to unread books, and at the moment there are only 4 or 5 books on that shelf. I am so proud of myself. I've been meaning to get through my unread books, but I never let it get out of hand because it stresses me out to have too many books that I haven't read yet. And I like having a little bit of choice, but when there's too much choice, it just stresses me out. So my priority is always to check my shelf first and see if there's anything unread. And if I don't really have anything, I just go online. I see the online bookstores as my personal storage. They're storing all the books in the world that I can ever dream of, just for me. And I can order them, I can bring them to my house at any time that I want, which is very kind of them. And yes, next question. As a musician, do you read books on music or books about composers like Bach, Mozart, Wagner, etc.? I love reading about musicians' lives, and I actually do one composer a month, where I listen to a composer for a complete month and I then research about his or her life. I recently also finished and really enjoyed the biography of Robert Schumann, and the memoirs of Hector Berlioz were so beautifully written, so interesting, and I highly recommend them. I have read them on Gutenberg. He just could have been an author. It was so well written. Next question. I am having a hard time reading at home. I only read in the morning before work at a coffee shop with coffee, as it helps me focus. When I get home, I spend too much time watching TV shows. What is a good way to break that habit and perhaps change my home to be more reader-friendly? The only thing that I can say is that it's going to ask dedication. First of all, it's going to ask a change in your mindset. And secondly, what can you do to make it more reader-friendly is to set up a reading corner, have a good chair, have good lighting. Don't underestimate good lighting. And preferably create that space away from the television. And what you could also do is see an episode of a TV show as a reward. So you first do the things that you feel like you have to do first, like reading for half an hour. And then you reward yourself by watching an episode of your TV show. That is the only thing that I can think of at the moment, but maybe someone in the comment section can help you out. I do think that it's very smart to go and read at the coffee shop. That sounds very cozy, and it's a smart way to minimize distractions. Okay, the next questions, I am going to read them one after the other because they're very similar, and then I'm going to answer them in their complete form. Perhaps this is a rather silly question, but how do you find value, interest, and engagement in classic literature compared to contemporary novels? I have always wanted to love and find value in the classics, but I struggle to get into the story and ultimately care what happens to the characters and why. In saying that, I've read quite a few classics that I've genuinely really enjoyed, but if I'm faced with the choice of a classic or a good contemporary novel, my choice almost always ends up being the contemporary novel. However, this is something that I would like to change. And the second question, do you change your approach to reading or your expectations of storytelling conventions and plot when you read classic literature? How do you stay interested in the stories where not a lot actually seems to happen? If the themes and subtext make a classic valuable and interesting, what happens if you don't understand and miss them entirely, only taking the story at face value? Are you then missing the point as a reader? Any thoughts or advice in this area for readers struggling to get into or understand the purpose behind classic literature would be much appreciated. I'm going to have to break this down into several sections. First of all, there is a big difference, of course, between older books and contemporary novels. In classics, we often see that the plot isn't that important. It's more about the characters, their struggles. It has a slower pacing and it is very character-driven. It is supposed to make you reflect deeply on yourself and on life. And first of all, it's really important to know at what level you are at when you want to start with classic literature. Because when you start with the very difficult books, and I'm not underestimating your intelligence, but it's just a fact that some classics are going to be very difficult to read for a beginner. I myself made the mistake. I've been reading classics for a long time now, and when I look back at the beginning of my journey, I picked all the famous and wrong books. And I'm really convinced that it's important to ease into the classics. I have made a video about where to start with classic literature, so I will link that in this video. But if you have made your personal curriculum of classics that aren't too difficult to ease into, I would recommend using websites like SparkNotes, for example, where you have chapters, summaries, and analyzations that can really help you to understand the novel better. Setting up a buddy read can also help, and then you can help each other understand or make sense of the book. And you also kind of have to change your mindset when you read a classic, because first of all, there's going to be the language, you have to focus more, there's going to be the heavy themes, and I would also like to encourage you to keep track of favorite quotes and passages. A lot of the conflict is going on inside the characters, and plot is way less important in a classic book. And yes, you can miss the point, but it's not because it's a classic that you have to enjoy it. We still have our own taste, and if something doesn't resonate with us, even though it's a classic, that's completely fine. You don't have to enjoy it, you don't have to find value in it. If you don't, that's fine. I also want to mention that there is nothing wrong with reading contemporary novels. If you love reading those, then by all means go for it. And what you can do is, like, for every 5 contemporary novels that you read, try to read one classic, because you say yourself that you would like to change that. So every 5 novels you read one classic. And if it doesn't work for you, don't beat yourself up. I am sure that there will be classics that you can fall in love with, but give yourself the time to ease into them. You will have to learn to read more actively, to really engage with the book, to ask yourself questions, to even look up things that you don't understand. But that's what makes it, for me, so much more beautiful, because you are going to learn new things. Next question. I'm not really sure what my question is, but I've noticed that you reread books a lot, and I do so rarely. I get too distracted by new books and rarely revisit, but I like to reread more. So not exactly a question, but something I'd like to improve on. Revisiting my favorite books. It's like returning to old friends, and it's such a beautiful experience. The things that you get out of a second reading, and even a third or more, wonderful. Now you can do something like, I'm going to read 5 new books, and then I'm going to reread a book that I really loved. I really very much want to encourage you to return to your favorite books. Next question. I would love to learn more about history and geography, but I feel like I don't know where to start. Would you have some recommendations of books or media in general to build general knowledge? I feel like I can't really help you with this. What I did for myself is I made a list of periods in history that I'm interested in and that I want to learn more about, and I just use the internet as a guide. I also use the novels that I read as a guide, because when something is mentioned about a thing in history, I tend to get curious and look it up, and it often happens that I just end up in a rabbit hole. And this way is how I really learn the most, is by just being curious. If you come across something interesting in a book, if there's something mentioned about the Sun King, for example, you start looking up the Sun King and read the Wikipedia page, or maybe watch a documentary about it, and maybe you can find something at your local library as well. Next question. What is a good way to learn to play an instrument on your own without classes? How to know which tutorials are good? As a musician, I do want to advise you, if you want to learn a new instrument, to at least take a few lessons just to make sure that you get your fingering and your technique right. Because when you learn something in the wrong way, it can really be difficult. It can be really difficult to unlearn. So maybe you could take just a few lessons, or maybe you know someone who can teach you and show you, and then you can proceed with your online lessons. Now, I don't know what instrument, but I cannot give you advice on channels or anything like that. Next question. Do you know of a good way to find titles of classics from around the world? It has been easy to find French, German, English ones, but I'm having trouble with non-European countries. Those are indeed more difficult to find. I'm sure there are a lot of channels talking about non-European classics. Maybe Reddit, maybe just Google it. And I'm sure that Wikipedia also has some interesting stuff on those classics as well. Next question. How do you manage to read multiple books? Do you have a specific time of the day for each book, or are you more like what I'm in the mood for right now? I usually read what I am in the mood for, but it also depends on what my goals are. For example, right now, I really want to work on my philosophy journey, and so obviously I'm going to slide in some philosophy books as well. How I manage to read multiple books is I do my French in the morning, like I said, so I have one French going on. I have a history book going on. It's a very big one about ancient Greece, and I do 6 pages a day, and I want to have finished it over the course of 3 months, okay? Then I have the book club book going on, and then I usually have something light to read as well. They're all very different from each other, and this really works for me. And here is the final question. I'd love some tips on how to balance reading with university studies without feeling guilty. I often feel guilty when I read for pleasure because I get thoughts like, wouldn't it be better for me to study and read my textbooks instead? Which leads me to read less, which is unfortunate. All I can say is that you deserve to take breaks, and when you feel bad, you could just limit your reading time and just say, I'm going to set a timer for 20 minutes and I'm going to just enjoy my reading, and then I go back to studying. Your study sessions will also be more productive when you allow yourself to relax a little bit. You could also use it as a reward, so every 50 minutes you study, you can read for 10 or 15 minutes. You could read during your lunch break, and you could also do some evening reading just before bed. Please don't feel too bad about it, because you cannot possibly be studying all the time. Okay, those were all of the questions. Thank you so much for sending them in. Please use the comment section as a way to help each other and support each other. We are a community here. And yes, I hope to see you next week.